Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to another episode of the Hunter's DREAMCAST. This is, of course, the podcast series where I discuss various topics whilst I roam around this beautiful location known as the Hunter's Dream, but I really shouldn't be saying that considering that this is just going to be another one of the episodes where we're just looking at pictures because still the monitor is messed up. But never minding that, getting to the point at hand, I am going to be talking about something today that I feel isn't really looked at a lot, and it's not looked at enough, and unfortunately, in a lot of instances in our very divisive age of culture and whatnot, I feel as though it's a problem that, we really should have solved by now, considering the amount of information that we have. But, unfortunately, it's something that's still here. I'm, of course, talking about the way that we view other countries, the way that we view the citizens of those countries, and propaganda as a whole. Now, I just want to start off by saying propaganda usually doesn't necessarily have to be something where you're looking at another country. I know the most infamous propaganda, it would be, like World War II and how, it portrayed Germans and Japanese and whatnot. But there was also a way of propaganda of how it portrays people here, and we can see that, by the political scene, how, we like to portray Democrats and Republicans, and they're like, oh, this is an elephant, this is a donkey, stuff like that, so you can really see the way that, people like to view people on differing spectrums and whatnot. And, I know I did a podcast about spectrums a bit ago, but I kind of want to talk more so about the spectrum of, propaganda, of how it affects how you view people. And I feel like one of the biggest problems that we have facing our culture today is this, over-divisive rhetoric. It's always this idea that this person is your enemy because they disagree with, an opinion of yours. And, we see that on all sides. Even people that I know that, say that, hey, I'm for free speech and whatnot, but then, someone disagrees with them and whatnot, and it's not necessarily that they're for, suppressing, a Democrat or a liberal would. It's just, in that case, they're like, well, they're my enemy. I'm like, well, no, that's not your enemy. You just don't agree on things. Why see someone who you're probably going to have to, see at some point in your life, if they're a coworker, if they're a family member or whatnot, as an enemy merely because they disagree with you, on certain ideas of how to run a country, if you will. I don't really think that's, the way to go, and unfortunately, again, both sides of the party, see it like that. There's no common ground that we can come to. We must hate each other, and we're enemies no matter what, and, any kind of arm that is stretched out is immediately slapped back and further continues the divisive rhetoric. And unfortunately, we saw this on an unholy amount during, World War. And it's still reflected when someone chooses to try and depict anything in World War. I have yet to hear any, case where people are, trying to humanize, the Nazis and whatnot. Because one of the common misconceptions that people had, I'd say is mainly the fact that, oh, they're in Nazi Germany, so they support Nazis, they support Hitler, and 100%. And that's completely stupid, there's plenty of people in America that, didn't give two craps about, what was happening over there. They just wanted to live their lives, and then, they got the letter saying, hey, you better go or you're going to jail. Which is utter rubbish when you really take the time to think about it, but, getting aside from that, it happened. But the point of the matter is, you don't support everything that your country stands for merely because you get drafted in a war and you now need to kill someone and wear a uniform. I'd wager that most of the time, and I've spoken to veterans, I've spoken to people who have had, bullets shot at them and whatnot. I've spoken to many people during, not necessarily World War, but I've spoken to people who have been in active combat in Afghanistan and whatnot. I've had a sergeant who was my teacher during JROTC, and I have also spoken to someone who is a veteran from Vietnam. And they can tell you right now, they're not thinking at all about, their country or anything about that. Most of the time, they're just thinking about their family and if they're going to be able to get back at them. And the reason that they're shooting is not because, oh, I'm fighting for freedom. It's because they don't want to die. People like to talk about war heroes and whatnot, and the people who are usually scarred from war usually are saying, war hero is not really what I would call it. It's just me just not wanting to die, pretty much, The thing that they don't really realize at the end of the day is when you have propaganda, when you have countries, whether it's Nazi Germany, whether it's America, whether it's wherever, saying this person is less than scum because, insert our reasons, and that is why we are sending you to get in front of bullets so that you can kill them, hopefully, these young people do not want to do this. That is just ridiculous. No matter what people may, say, oh, they may honestly feel, really puffed up, in like the concept of, oh, you're just a coward, you don't want to go to the draft, you don't want to serve your country. When they're actually there, all of that gusto, you know, when you're getting shot at, when there's bombs, when you're seeing your comrades get blown to pieces, all of that gusto flies out the window, mate. Like, all of that gusto flies out the window. The tough guy act falls because you realize how much of a problem that this really is and the predicament that you find yourself in. And that's why most people just literally are unable to move. You can ask it. You know, it's historically proven. Most of the people on the battlefield, they stop. They shut down, shell shock, you know? They don't move. Like, they go into a catatonic state. It's that simple, you know? People need to get it through their heads that, like, this concept of viewing people as an enemy merely because of the stances that they have are ridiculous. There are reasons why people are in that stance, and some of them are just beyond their control. And in the case of propaganda, you know, let's talk about that for a moment. Let's just talk about the concept of, you know, just being out of control. For one, birth. You don't decide where you're born. You know, you can say, oh, China's our enemy, Russia's our enemy, oh, Pakistan, or wherever is our enemy, okay, whatever. The country can sit around here and tell you that in the school books all you want, and say, oh, all the people over there are evil, and it's a communist or socialist regime, yada yada yada. And yeah, that may very well be a problem, but to say that everyone there, you know, supports that regime and whatnot, merely because they exist over there is just, that's just stupid. Like, why would you assume, why would you make the assumption that somehow everyone who is in whatever country and whatever government that is, like, less than stellar supports that stuff? You know, like, I mean, I can't tell you just how many, like, things, like, I see over in Africa where, like, you know, we have freaking ridiculous human slavery and trade and whatnot, and, like, human trafficking, and you're telling me that, you know, like, oh, everyone in Africa is, like, our enemy or something merely because they're over in they're in a really corrupt government? Like, what? That's ridiculous. That's just pure propaganda, like I'm saying. People need to keep in mind, again, like I'm saying, that's a human being over there. They didn't decide where they're born. You don't decide where you're born. Like, you may be in America right now, you may literally have the like, American ego, unfortunately, which is really annoying. And that's one of my problems with, you know, like, people in Western culture. And don't get me wrong, I love America, and I respect the privileges that I have in America, but, like, this idea that everyone who is not an American is our enemy merely because, you know, they are under, you know, a communist regime, a socialist regime, it's ridiculous. Like, they did not decide to be there. You didn't decide to be in America. You can go ahead and think that you did, but you didn't. You know, your parents could have easily had you in one of these countries that you like giving so much crap about. Yes, you could have been born in China. You could have been born in Russia. You could have been born in Nazi Germany. That happens. You don't get to decide where you're born. It's literally ridiculous to make the assumption as though everyone in this part of the world is fine with the way that the government is handling things and is eager to fight and kill other people for the way that, you know, the government is handling things because they love the government. That is just not the case. That's not the case at all. Like I said, when you're on the actual battlefield, you don't give a crap about what the country's, you know, giving the reasons for that you're being there. You just don't want to die. That's just the truth. And I feel like, you know, a really good example of this that I feel missed the mark in this, for example, was Private Ryan. Saving Private Ryan. I recently saw that film, and, you know, like, it really depicted, you know, really well, like, you know, what soldiers feel, but I honestly feel like what they didn't depict well is, like, just the simple fact that, you know, again, the Germans were soldiers too, and just because they had the Nazi uniform on does not mean that they were in support of Nazi Germany. Again, this goes back to the idea that just because you're in a freaking uniform that you are now somehow supporting everything that America stands. For example, like, I can say this, and, you know, like, you can say what you will, like, and if you're a veteran, I'm sorry, but, you know, as the way that America is right now, I wouldn't fight for America. I would not fight for America right now. Because what America is right now is you don't say what you want to say, I get to suppress you, we can't support freaking workers and whatnot, and, you know, it's just corporations, and then we have SJWs. We had, look at last year, you know, like, how many people lost their jobs, how many people lost their businesses, everything that they worked for in their life, because some little prick decided, oh, I'm gonna go and loot this store, and the cops just don't do anything. Why would I want to fight for a country like that can't support its citizens, but then they think that I'm gonna go ahead and get in front of cannons and whatnot, you know, as meat shield? No, you're freaking crazy. And, you know, and if you're a veteran, you know, I'm sorry, but, like, I think that you would probably feel the same way. Like, if you honestly asked most of these veterans, you know, would you be willing to fight, you know, for America for what it is now, or would you want to fight for what it was? Most people are going to say more often than not they'd fight for what it was. They wouldn't fight for what it is now. So, you know, just getting off of that, because I don't want to, you know, get sidetracked. The point of the matter is, when someone is trying to, when the government, for example, is trying to force you to go into, like, some kind of act of service and whatnot, and say, oh, it's your duty and whatnot, like, again, like, you have to ask yourself, like, what is the real point that I'm going over here? You know what I mean? Like, that's one of the biggest things. I can't tell you, like, how many, instances I read about in history where, like, the, chant was, I can't remember who it was, but it was whoever the president was for Vietnam, and it was like, hey, how many kids did you kill today? Because for them, they felt like their kids were over in Vietnam and they were dying for literally no reason, And they didn't get a say. They just had to go, Their lives were just stolen away from them, and they said, you're gonna fight, and that's that. And funnily enough, it's really interesting about, how countries like to depict other countries and say, oh, they're less than scum, they're enemies, you need to go over there. And the funny thing is, the people saying that are the people never fighting. Like, just how fitting is that? The person saying that from behind the office, sipping wine, eating, like, nice dinners and whatnot, they're the ones telling you, the people actually going to be fighting, like, what terrorists, what absolute trash excuses of human beings that they are, merely because they live in those other countries, and so, therefore, they support everything that that country stands for. Which is ridiculous. I live in America. I absolutely do not support everything that America, stands for, at least right now, and, even more so, I guess, like, to an extent, because it's like, you're never going to agree fully on absolutely everything. Like, let's not get too blind into, like, nationalism here. You're never going to fully support every little minor, detail that, your country was founded on and, supports. That's just ridiculous. I don't know anyone, even people who are hardcore patriots, that would support every single little detail that, America supports. And if they think that they do, I'm sure that, they haven't read absolutely everything within the Constitution or within the laws that are available now. For example, I can tell you right now, and you might say, well, TCD, that's hogwash. I'm absolutely a patriot. I'm going to say, okay, mate. So, do you honestly support the idea that you can go to jail for defending yourself? And I don't think there are any patriots that would say, yes, like, I support the idea that, you can get arrested for defending yourself. Are you honestly going to say that because a war happens right now, and I get drafted, that I am honestly 100% in favor of being able to defend myself and then go to jail because I defended myself because, the law said, that was excessive force. Like, no. So let's not, pretend for a moment that we honestly support every little detail that, America supports merely on the concept of, I live in America and I'm wearing the uniform, and so thus I fight for everything that America stands for. That's just ridiculous. And we need to understand that that holds true for other countries in the sense that, again, most of the time when someone's fighting in a war, they don't have the choice. If you want to know who your enemies are, like, the common saying is, look at who you can't criticize. And you see that in a lot of instances, even in a country like America and whatnot. Yeah, you have freedom of speech, but when it came down to the war, if you questioned the war, they just said you're a Nazi sympathizer, you're this, that, or the other, so don't get it twisted, like, cancel culture in a way was around, just in a different standard. Yeah, maybe they didn't muzzle you and destroy your entire livelihood, but I can't tell you, like, how often people who said, hey, well, not everyone in Germany, is a Nazi and supports the Nazi regime, they're just there, and whatnot. And so they're just like, oh, no, you're this, that, or the other, they should have just moved, yada, yada, yada. As I take a sip of water, that's what they would say, but at the end of the day, that was just ridiculous. You're telling me that because something bad is happening in your area, like, everyone can just, like, all of a sudden leave everything that they know and just hope that they will have, what they had there in another country. Like, that's just ridiculous. Yes, sometimes you'll get even more than what you had there, but there's not many people that would just walk up and just say, alright, I'm just gonna dump this and just go in another country and hopefully I'll gain everything back. That's just completely unreasonable. And unfortunately, like, I just don't really see the reason, why. Because there was a time where, like, like, we could just say, hey, we didn't have access to nearly this much information. We didn't have access to, like, see what they were doing over there. Now we're in a day and age where, like, I really don't see why we can't understand that those are people too. Especially considering that, we have all these satellites and we see all these images. We see about how those cultures operate. And at the end of the day, we see that those are human beings, just like you and I. They may not agree with everything that we agree with, but at the end of the day, they are deserving of respect. Treat others how you want to be treated. Do unto others as you want to be done unto you. The fact of the matter, though, is so many people still to this day, like, like, when you bring up stuff like World War II, when you bring up stuff like Vietnam, when you bring up stuff like, the Middle East and whatnot, it's just this black and white concept where it's like there's no gray area, and it's ridiculous, because people who you'd think, like, would, like, know about this stuff, people who you normally think are pretty reasonable on this, you know, they're not. They're just like, oh, you know, for example, like, what's happening currently in Jerusalem and, like, what is it, Gaza or something? And, like, Hassan or Hassam, I don't know. I'm not really very good at pronunciation of Middle Eastern names, so let's just say, you know what I'm talking about, like the rockets and whatnot, and people are like, oh, we must support Pakistan, no, we must support, Jerusalem and whatnot. I'm like, well, where's the black and white? Not black and white, where's the gray? Like, what is with the black and white? You know, why can't we just accept that there are literally human beings that are being killed on both sides of the spectrum because of this crap? You know, like, why are you trying to pick one side? Why can't we try and have some understanding, no matter what your opinion on the matter is? Just the fact that that this is causing human suffering, this is causing kids to be orphans, this is causing, you know, mothers and fathers to lose their children. What is so difficult to understand that this is a gray area? This is a kind of a gray situation where it's very easy to try and side with someone that you like or someone that you don't like, and so this is why you side with that person. But there's so much more to this than just, oh, these are just, you know, terrorists, and so we must side with this people, or that people are nothing but thieves, and so we need to side with this people. Like, we're in a day and age where we have access to such, you know, vast amounts of history and whatnot, that it's just absolute stupidity to make the assumption as though you are obligated to side with this because we say so. You know, because our culture says so. Because that's what happened back in the day, you know? Like, aren't we in a day and age of, air quotes, progressive, you know, stuff? Like, shouldn't we take advantage of the technology that we have available to us to come to far different conclusions than what our people before us came to? Because now we actually can see what happened in their daily lives, and we can understand where they were coming from. I can tell you right now that during World War I and II, you know, many people weren't really thinking about where the Germans were coming from, but now that we have access to the information, now that we can see the letters that they were writing and whatnot, we can see where they're coming from. Heck, a common thing that people actually don't realize is fraternizing was very common back then. There were many instances, whether it was a civil war and whatnot, where people would actually be trading goods and whatnot and keeping each other alive. And a common thing that these soldiers would ask, whether it was the Civil War, whether it was World War, no matter what kind of war it was, you know, if they could speak the same language to some extent, what they would ask is, why are we killing each other? You know? Some soldiers got really hardened and they just said, no, that's my enemy because, you know, my buddies got killed by them and whatnot. But other soldiers who, you know, were still hardened by it, but, like, they just wanted it to end, you know, the main thing that they would just ask is, why are we killing each other? You know, like, why? And they would just be both dumbfounded because the fact of the matter is they didn't get a say. They were forced into that position because the government just says, you need to go, you need to kill, and that's that. And for people who are probably like the warmongers saying, oh no, there are reasons that we go to war. Listen, I absolutely am not saying that, well, we can't have a military or something. If some country is invading your country, that's completely different than, you know, like you going into another country, for example. And yes, there are certain instances where, yes, those countries they need to be stopped, like Hitler, for example. Yes, obviously. But what I am saying in instances is, there are also instances where, like, the government is just saying, go there. And there is literally no justifiable reason that they're saying go there. And mothers are watching their children die, and, you know, wives are becoming widows, and it's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous to say the least that it's happening. And unfortunately, people just don't. They don't rush up on history to realize that these people were human beings. Like, for example, right? The concept is, say, like World War II. During Christmas, people actually don't realize this, but during Christmas, Nazis and U.S. soldiers would cease fire and actually get around the trees and actually sing, you know, Christmas songs and whatnot. And sing about, like, you know, the birth of the Savior Jesus Christ and stuff like that. They would actually sing about that. Both of them. They would gather around. You'd actually have many instances of it. Of course, the governments weren't too keen on that because, you know, that's a monster, you know. They're less than scum because, you know, we said so, and so you must accept that we said that, and therefore, you know, like, they're scum, don't fraternize. You know? And you see that, unfortunately, most of the time during sessions, because, like, someone that I spoke to who was a vet, right? You know, like, what they say, like, upon their, like, therapy and their counseling is you had no choice, and, you know, like, they were bad people. And it's like, what kind of psychiatrist, like, is that? Like, why can't you just tell the person that, yeah, you didn't have a choice, but, like, like, it's not like you wanted to or they wanted to. That was just a position that, the government's put you in and whatnot. Now, maybe, like, like, I don't know, like, I can't necessarily say because, like, I'm not someone who's studied up on that stuff. Now, maybe the government's, like, tell you, hey, you're not allowed to, say that, oh, it's the government or something like that. But, then the fact goes back to, like, freedom of speech and is it really free, stuff like that. But that's a whole nother video. But just the concept of the matter is, if you're encouraging someone who is, like, really traumatized from war and whatnot, that, oh, those people were still just nothing but scum, like, that's just not doing anything for you. Like, shouldn't we be learning that that is still a human being, either way, whether we agree with the styles that they practice or not? That's still a human being. Excuse me, I need another sip of water. But, unfortunately, it's just not the case. Most of the time that you hear it's just like, no matter where it is, whether the person was a World War II veteran, a Vietnam veteran, or, a Middle East veteran. It's always, those people were bad, you were good, you had no choice. Instead of it being more of a situation of, you were just kind of forced into that position, you didn't really have much of a say, like, I just don't know. It's just such a, perplexing issue for the concept that today is not at an age that I think that we can excuse viewing the world in a black and white lens because of the amount of information that we have available to us. There is absolutely no reason why anyone should just say, this group of people is bad because they are under this kind of a government, and therefore they support everything that that government does. Like, that's just, that's not true. And it's wrong to make the assumption like that. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing wrong with loving your country, right? Isn't that what being a patriot is about? Well, you also need to understand that someone's going to be a patriot for a country that they like. Whether that is Russia, whether that is China, whether that is, like, a Middle East country. They're allowed to like that country as well. And even though we do not agree with everything that happens over there, those are still human beings. And no matter how much you want to tell yourself that they're not, they're scum, they're terrorists, they're Nazis, they're this, they're that, communists, socialists, whatever you want to brand them as, you're just buying into the freaking concept of the government just saying, yes, divide those people, they're nothing but scum and whatnot. And when you try and question the government on that, guess what happens to you? Oh, what's that? You're questioning the war efforts? We'll put you in jail. You have to understand, folks, like, this is not this is not something where it's just like a very easy to solve issue. This is a very complex issue. It's marketing. All propaganda really is just marketing, Once you learn how marketing works, it has far less of effect on you. I can tell you from experience, I studied business with my step-aunt for a few years. I think it was like 2 years, right? Within that short time frame, I learned so much about how marketing works. For example, let's take a look at the food market, right? Let's talk about a nice little, say a commercial about a burger and a pizza. In that commercial for that burger, those ingredients are fresh. I mean, that lettuce looks nice and green. The tomatoes are succulent. There's the perfect amount of sauce. That patty is just, it looks fan-bloody-tastic, The brioche buns, my goodness. Now you go and you get that burger for real. That lettuce is usually, more or less just average. It's not nearly as green as it was in the commercial. The tomato is average and whatnot. Usually it's sliced even smaller and whatnot. You barely got any sometimes. Sometimes you only got half of a tomato on there, And then the burger is just average. It doesn't look nearly as juicy. It doesn't look nearly as succulent. It's just average. Let's talk about the pizza in the commercial, right? The pizza, those ingredients are fresh. There's such a huge amount of pepperoni. It's just wonderful, right? Then you actually get the real pizza, Oh, excuse me, and I forgot to mention, like, during the commercial, when they're doing the cheese pulls and whatnot, they're adding glue to the pizza and whatnot. They say, this is just beautiful. Because they're marketing, they have all those close-ups, and it's just beautiful. You get the pizza, and there is no cheese pull whatsoever. You bite, and that's that. The amount of cheese is just there to cover the pizza, and that's that. Still good, but it's not nearly as good as the commercial portrays, because it's marketing. The same holds true to propaganda. It is marketing. This person is just bad, They are nothing but scum because they are Nazis, and therefore it killed them. You know, they normalize it in such a massive way. They normalize, like, this ridiculous form of marketing, and it's, as far as I'm concerned, it's like brainwashing, really, when you really think about it, you know, because it's easy to say, oh, well, the Nazis were brainwashed, you know, because they were doing, and don't get it twisted. Yes, a lot of those citizens who honestly supported that regime, yes, they were brainwashed. They weren't aware of the concentration camps. They weren't aware of that stuff and whatnot, which is why when they did see that, they came out the place crying. You think they supported the treatment of people, of human beings like that? No. They had no clue that that was going on. And that's why when they came from there, they were devastated. Completely devastated. But at the same time, you know, I hate to break it to you, but propaganda is a form of brainwashing. You are convinced that that person is nothing but scum, trash, excuse of a human being, and they need to go over there and blow their brains out and whatnot. And sometimes it's gotten so bad to the extent that, you know, like, when they're doing stuff like that, they relish that, you know. We talk about war crimes when it's, like, you know, a crime against, like, say, a citizen of this country, but then we don't speak about war crimes when it's committed towards the citizens of another country, you know. Are we not going to talk about the fact that soldiers, you know, even American soldiers, did in fact rape, did in fact commit war crimes? Eh? Are we not going to talk about that? You know, war crimes are war crimes, right? So they should matter under all circumstances, not just, well, they're terrorists and so they don't have rights. And I can tell you, like, a vet that I spoke to, you know, he said they went to a village and whatnot in Vietnam, and, you know, they joked casually about, like, you know, offing the civilians, because they said, well, we don't know if they're if they would inform the I don't know what the term is, but the Vietnamese soldiers and whatnot, they use another term, but we don't know if they would inform them, and thus they usually waste the villages and whatnot. And some of the soldiers would joke about how they cracked some villagers' head open. They would joke about that. That's what he said. That's what he told me. That's what he gets therapy, and, like, when he hears loud bangs and whatnot, you know, he gets flashbacks and whatnot. So that's why, you know, still to this day, he'll sometimes have, like, a shake, and he'll need to you know, get therapy and whatnot. The point that I'm trying to get across here is, everyone, I don't care who you are, I don't care what kind of country you are, I don't care how uppity you are, convinced about how amazing you are because you're a capitalist, you're a communist, you're a socialist, whatever the heck you want to call yourself, okay, wherever you are in the world, everyone is capable of committing war crimes. You are not better than someone merely because of the country that you are in, and nor did you have any say about the country that you were born into. And this idea and this concept that people in other parts of the world are just trash because of where they were born and whatnot is just, it's not sustainable. It's just ridiculous. You know, back in the day, again, you know, they didn't have access to the information that we have access to now. We have access to history now. So to see it on this scale is ridiculous. And, you know, like, just lowering it to, like, just this country, for example, you know, like, just this divisive rhetoric between right, left, and Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal, you know, it's no. And now, with what's going on in the Middle East, it's just, oh, we must protect Jerusalem, we must be against Jerusalem, we must be for Pakistan, like, oh my goodness. Where is the middle ground? What is going on? Where is the middle ground? You know, like, it's just proof that these people just don't know history. Because right now, it's just repeating itself, just in a different format, you know? And worst of all, when it does repeat itself, these people just, they aren't ready for, like, the concept of war. They just don't understand the horror that entails, you know? So, my request to people is, please, for goodness sake, study history. Stop seeing the world in this freaking black and white gray, you know, fashion. You know, understand that there is black and white, and there is also gray, but understand that there is a combination, because it's wrong to just say it's always relative, and it's also wrong to say that it's always black or white. You need to understand that there are gray areas, because life is not as simple as we were told when we were children, you know. When you're an adult, you understand a lot more things. So please, understand that, and let's use that to move forward rather than just further this ridiculous rhetoric of propaganda, okay? But I think that's going to go ahead and conclude my thoughts on the matter. I hope that you are understanding the message that I am trying to get across here. No matter where you come from and whatnot, we're all human beings at the end of the day, and issues that we face and whatnot are not nearly as black and white as our governments like to make them out to be as their excuse for sending us to likely early graves. So please, I hope that you guys understand that, and I hope you guys accept that, and I hope you guys kind of share this around. So as always, rate the video what you think it deserves. Tell me what you want to see in the future in the comments below. Feel free to check out my amino in the description as well as my YouTube channel in the description. I would like to thank you all for watching. God bless, and I will see you next time.